Hey everybody, Gisele Grenier here. In this tutorial, we're going to be going over how to paint women's lips with acrylic paints. And for this particular, I wouldn't call it a challenge, for this particular tutorial, the lips are very bright with a flat dark side to them. I'm going to be using thick acrylics to show you how to work around that. And I'm going to be showing you a variety of different brushes to help you understand which brushes to use for your painting projects. Because although this is one way of doing it, you will all have different paint, you'll all have different brushes, you'll all be working from different photographs. I am posting the link for this photograph so you can actually work along with me. But the idea is fluid, medium, and thick paint. That's how I classify the paints. And then the brushes, you've got stiff brushes, soft brushes, bristle brushes, synthetic brushes, and then you've got then the shape, whether it's round, filbert, liner, flat, all these categories, generic categories that apply to anything. When it comes to brand specific and brand manufacturing, if something is very unique to that brand, then I will let you know. All right, on the table. So I've got this this sketch here of a pair of lips, and the photograph I'm going to be showing you. Oops, I just turned my volume off. I'm going to be working from this photo. It's from Pixabay. Look at all the dust prints on there. So I'm going to be posting that link for you. I'm going to put that over here. Although working from life is always best, so if you can stand in front of a mirror and do a still life of your own lips, that's always best. There will be a lesson covering that later on. We don't live in a perfect world. Photographs make it easy because models don't want to sit for hours while you're trying to figure stuff out. So working from photographs for these studies are a great way to get practice. And then what to do though when working with the studies is that you want to try to keep them as short as possible. You want to get caught up in details. Unless you're looking at becoming a hyper-realistic artist, which your paintings look like photographs, this is not going to be the style of teaching because that's not how I teach. I teach a method of expressing yourself using the paint, whatever you have in paints and supplies and means for reference material. And myself, I don't like paintings that look like photographs because that's just me personally. That just shows that the artist is good at painting paintings that look like photographs. I like seeing spirit and expression in artwork. That's the way I teach. So at this point, then you can decide whether or not this is going to be for you. I reserve the right to change the photograph to paint it the way that I want to paint it because I'm not doing a commission. Okay, when commissions are different. Depending if you've done paintings and you're asked to do a commission and the person knows your style, then that's okay. If you're an impressionistic painter and the person goes to you, I want you to paint a realistic painting of my wife or my husband or whatever, then it's okay to say no because that's not your style. So my style is I'm not painting all that facial hair in the photograph. I'm just not. Although I will be doing a lesson later on drawing facial hair and painting facial hair and all that stuff, but I'm not going to be doing it in this lesson. I just went and got another tube of paint because I was missing. I will be painting a little bit of skin tone around just as a base to set the lips. So the paints I'm going to be using is going to be the Deco Art Americana Premium Acrylics. I've got Quinacridone Violet, Cad Red Hue, Cad Orange Hue, Hansa Yellow Medium, Yellow Oxide, Titanium White. I've got the Extender Medium, and I've got some Gloss Medium because I'm going to throw in a little extra little trick using this. The challenge that we have when creating a painting from a photograph is that the photograph, I always call the photograph wrong. The photograph never really represents how something looks in real life. It's one-dimensional. The lighting is different. Your devices are all calibrated different. How I'm going to be painting this photograph will likely not be what you see when you look at the photograph on your device because all devices are calibrated differently. So use what you have in front of you. Don't paint it according to what I'm doing. I'm giving you guidelines. Paint with what you have in front of you. Ideally, if you can just look at it on the device, that's fine. You can also print a copy when creating the sketch. The line that's grid system is a really great way of doing that. It also teaches you how to draw and paint what you see, not what you think you see. So I did the quick sketch on here, and the challenge is going to be matching the paints. Now, with the premium acrylics, the Cad Red Hue, Cad Orange Hue are not pure. They're made up with 2 colors each. So the Cad Red Hue is made up with PR112 and PR170. So, and then the cad orange hue is made up with PO13 and PY175. What does that tell you? You need to know. You need to understand what this information tells you. What this tells me is that this orange, this cad orange hue, PO13, it already has pigment orange in it, but it's also made up with PY175, which is a yellow. So this tells me that this leans more towards yellow. It's orange plus more yellow. Where the red, PR112, PR170, is just two reds, and the reds are a dark red. Everything else is single pigment. This should be, yeah, that single pigment. All right, so we're going to work with that. So although I will not be able to color match it exact, I'm totally okay with that. And let's go with, let's first get some type of base in there. I'm going to take a little bit of yellow oxide, and I'm going to work with a stiffer brush. The brushes, when you're working with thick paints, you really should be using a stiffer brush. So whereas this little brush here is like super soft, it has a hard time picking up these paints because it's a soft brush. Then this one here is also soft, and this one here is nice and stiff. So depending on the paint you're using, if you find that your paints, your brush is just, you're loading it up and it's just, the brush is going flat, go to a stiffer brush because the paint's too thick. If you're using thin paint, you really can use anything you want. So I'm going to be making a base first. And her skin tone is quite light. It's quite dull. Light dull, and it looks like it has a tinge of green in it. I'm not going to be putting any green in this because it's not about the skin tone. It's about the lips. So let's get that in there. And you know what? I think I may have to go with a little bit of green. Yep, I'm gonna have to go with a tiny bit of green. I'm gonna reach for the thing that was closest, which was just the DecoArt Tradition sap green. And I'm talking just a speck. Tiny, 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 tiny bit. Much better. What the green does is it neutralizes. There we go. There we go. It neutralizes the color. And I'm going to add a lot more white in here because this gets darker. Okay, so let's just get something in there. This brush handles this paint quite nicely. This is a Modena brush from Royal Brush, but any nice stiff brush will work. You don't want to use a watercolor brush because it'll be too thin. And then this is a little bit darker, so I'm going to go with a little bit more yellow oxide. Right in here. Okay. Now I'm looking at this and it looks like a peachy, which is a bit dull. And I'm looking at the camera and it looks green. That's bizarre. So another reason why that it depends on the device that you're using. So let's just get that in there. And things are much brighter here. So on my dirty brush is going to take white, and while everything is wet. And let's just get that in there and just use the leftover paint. I'm going to take a little bit of green, violet, red, making something quite dull. A bit more green. The sap green is much weaker than the red and the violet. So you see, I made chromatic black, adding white to make gray. See? I'm looking at the photograph. Yeah, looking at the photograph, and it's quite dark on this side. So doing this also helps identify where the shadows are. Because right now I'm just setting a base. That's all I'm doing. And it's a little bit more challenging doing it this way because you usually be working on a canvas. Just setting up a base. Okay, let's wipe off that excess paint, and let's just thinning this out a bit just so it dries a little bit faster. I've got the AC on. We're having another super hot day. And it's hot here, light here. There we go. All right, we're going to do it that way. And we'll let that dry. Now, when you're painting also the substrate you're working on, which I didn't cover, I'm using a piece of Terraskin, which is paper made from stone. If you're working on watercolor paper or canvas, make sure it's at least double or triple primed with gesso, and that way it'll help, you know, hold the paint. So with this, I'm going to start now with the lips, and you know, I'm going to be very careful when I'm working around. What's the first color I see? I see red. Well, let's take this red and put that on there. This is a really close red. You know that? This red is really close. I'm just going to work with this. And I'm going to I'm going to underpaint the lips. I cannot get over how close that is. Holy moly. Okay. So let's just get an underpainting in there. And with the lips, I don't mind if the colors meld together, just as long as I know that I need to fix those up a bit. Can't leave it like that. So you see now I'm having a bit of trouble getting that paint in there. The brush is nice and stiff, but there's very little paint left in the brush. If I push a little bit harder, that's fine. I just need to load a bit more paint. Now, let's go with a really soft brush, just to show you. See how it flattens out? I mean, it's great for wide coverage, but when I get to detail, I have to be very careful because the brush changes direction quite easily. You just have to be very, very careful on getting that in there. See, I can't quite get at a point to get that nice detail, but if I use this brush here, look how nice and smooth that is. And by creating applying the paint this way, it also acts as those natural little wrinkles in the lips. Again, it's not going to be left like this. This is just an underpainting. It's supposed to be ugly at this stage. Okay. And let's rinse these brushes. And you can work wet on dry, letting each layer dry, or you can work wet on wet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my really, really soft brush and see, it's just there, and I'm going to soften those edges. I want the lips to blend a little bit into that background. I don't want it to be such a hard color, although in the photograph it is a hard color. But see, this is too soft. I can't get any type of detail with this type of brush. But if I go with this nice brush here that stays at that point, watch. It stays at that point. Okay, I can blend and soften that edge. Go round and round. And this is the type of brushes that really make for nice techniques. I can even write in there, although I'm not going to, but just to show you that a stiff brush really can help your painting. And then if you go with something, you know, like a little dry brush, we're going to cover this one as well. You know, you have to apply that one on a dry surface. So while we're here, so this super soft brush, I'm going to put that away. I'll just stick with the, let's go with this one here. So this is a medium soft brush. Let's see what this one can do. I want to darken this corner up a bit, so I'm going to take a little bit of violet and a speck of green. A bit more than that. And that's not enough. Might have to let it dry. There we go. Yeah, I'm gonna have to let this dry. So with this paint, it's because it's really heavy, is that I'm dragging the brush, and it's literally making a channel where the paint is because it's just so thick. So I'm gonna let this dry. You can take a heat gun. I'm just gonna feather that out. You can take a heat gun to let that stuff dry. Feather that out. Won't take long. But you can see how nice and dark that is. If I was using the fluid acrylics or the traditions, I wouldn't be having this problem because the paint is much more fluid. And this paint here, because it's so thick, I don't want to add too much water to it because it'll break down the strength of the paint, the binder. Let's just get that in there. She's got a dark spot right here. See, now the paint is dry a little bit here. Now I'm actually able to paint. Okay, so let's just... Oh, this is getting a little bit better. I'm able to paint and not just move the paint around. And my phone just went off, so I lost my photograph. So you see what I mean? Before, when I was painting, the paint was just moving, but now it's actually sticking. Turn that back on. So right now I'm getting this dark part right in here. So I'm using a synthetic Taklon brush. This is the Majestic brush. It's soft. It's really soft. So it's some parts, as I'm going over the layer I just put on, the paint is still wet. It's not sticking. So if I were to thin it down with a little bit of, actually not water, extender. Using extender makes the paint transparent. And I'm using a gel extender, so it's not going to thin it down. If you wanted to use a liquid extender, DecoArt has a liquid version, it will also thin the paint down. This, though, the extender, it takes longer to dry, but it's, now the paint is actually going on. Thin paint goes on top of thick paint much easier. Thick paint, it doesn't quite stick very well. There we go, much better. And there's and the shadow goes right about to here. But there still will be a point where you need to let it dry. See here? That line there, that's the paint is just not quite dry. But I like making my strokes up and down because that just helps build up all that texture in the lips. And I'm going to go over here and just make another pass. I'm just using the same dirty brush. I'm not covering everything. Now these painting studies are meant to be studies. You're basically looking at shape, values, color, and all that stuff. Try not to overdo the detail part on the painting study. You want to try to keep it as short as possible. And in saying that, this is going to be about a half an hour lesson, only because I'm doing a lot of talking to explain what I'm doing. Let's get that out of the way. So I'm going to go with a little bit of orange. And I'm going to put a little bit of orange right here. Not a lot, just a little bit. Because there's quite a light spot right here. Then I'm going to take a little bit of yellow. That's a yellow medium. And do the same thing right in there. Right where that really bright white, those white marks are. It's only on the bottom. That's about the extent of the yellow that I'm going to be using. But I need to really deepen up that red. So the challenge I'm having now is because I'm working on Terraskin without any gesso, the paint is just slipping and sliding. So I need to let this dry, and then when I come back, I'll put on another layer. Okay, we have a visitor. She's under my desk, so I have to be careful. Okay, I did something which I should have warned you not, well, okay, I was going to say, should have warned you not to do this. I did it and I totally forgot. If you're working on Terraskin, which is paper made from stone, you can't use a heat gun. Just look. It literally bent the crap out of the paper because it's not paper. Okay, so and it's going to permanently stay like that. You can try ironing it. I wouldn't recommend. So heat and Terraskin don't work well together. But doesn't matter what I do. It actually changes the physical properties of the paint. But for mixed media, set this puppy on fire. It creates some really nice things. Not to say you should play with fire. I also wanted to go over with matte medium with what I'm doing here. Working on the Terraskin because it was smooth. And let's say, let's pretend we didn't have any gesso. This particular paint that I'm using is it's not, well, I call it plasticky. It's very slippery. It's a very plasticky feel to the paint, which is great for impasto and abstract and stuff. If you're looking at getting something where some texture, especially if you don't have any gesso and the surface is fine, like the Terraskin, apply a layer of matte medium to create some tooth. And even with that, through each layer, you can add more matte medium just to create that tooth. So if you're working with a very slippery paint, like a shiny paint, glossy paint, the matte medium will work. Except for the very final layer, you want that to be the actual paint, so you have the natural finish. So that's one thing I wanted to add in there. You can see that it did dry much darker. And now I'm going to go with the Filbert brush. So Filbert brush is great for that nice spring rounded edge, where a square brush you have those corners, and sometimes you can get blobs of paint in there. So let's go over. I'm going to take a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red. Let's go with a little bit of white. And let's go in here. And it's great for large coverage, but you get those nice, you get some nice details in there. A bit more white. There we go. And if you turn the brush on an angle, okay, you get more of a detail line, but you can also flatten it out for wider coverage. So touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift, touch, push, lift. And where you do the touch, push, and the push part creates that heavier mark. So touch, push, lift. That's a bit exaggerated, but you see where I did the push part? And we'll just blend that out a little bit. See, the paint is so slippery. It takes a lot longer to dry. And this is one of those things that I actually do use my fingers when it comes to painting to blend stuff in. See, too much? Just blend that out a bit. You get all those nice effects. And with a Filbert brush, it's a nice brush to use because you're getting the benefit of a flat brush, but you're getting also the benefit of a tapered edge, just so you can get irregular strokes, which is nice. We don't want a perfect line. Okay, then once that dries, if I go back over with, let's say, another transparent red, I'll be able to glaze, meaning I'll have all this detail, but the red is transparent, so all I'm going to have is some value changes. So with doing glazing, you can have a lot of texture underneath, a lot of physical like brush work and a lot of detail work, and the transparent layer on top, you can still see that work, but it's just a different color. So using white is a great way of doing that because it adjusts the values. And that's just something you have to practice with. Now on this side, let's go with this little dome brush. Okay, the way to use this one is you load the brush. I'm going to get a little bit of violet in there. Oh, and I need a paper towel. Oh, actually, I just use my table. I use it dry, and I rub. Then you come in here, and I just apply that in a dry brushing fashion. Now let's go over here a little bit more. Let's see here. Terra Skin is perfect for dry brushing because it's not paper. You won't get any fibers coming up. That drives me bat crap crazy is when the fibers come up. And so there's a shadow here. Let's go up a little bit higher. And it'll dry a little bit faster. And if we take a little bit of green into the red, get something really, really dark. You got to make sure you wipe off the excess though. Because there's very little detail here. And I'm going to turn my phone upside down. And let's just go. I mean, it's really dark here. I've got a glare. So a dry brush is nice for a soft effect. Take whatever's left over in my brush and we'll just go on the bottom here. What you run into trouble though is getting that fine point. Like right in here, you can see I can't get to the actual outside without going over a bit of the skin tone. You just cover it. You just have to go back over with the skin tone again. No biggie. See? And I'll just go over the lips. You can see just quite rough, but look how it's creating that nice divider. And right in there, it's stuck here a little bit. Okay, gonna take a look at the photograph a little bit more. Now this is just one brush that you can use. You can get them flats and that type of thing. So that's that. Oh, let's put that in water. Okay, so another one. This is a, how small is this? Oh, I can't even see. This is I can't see. A number 1 round brush. When you get brushes that are this thin, you have to use them with thin paint. I mean, you get really detailed, but then you're going to end up getting stuck with a line like that. So I just like to put the line in there and then bring it up a little bit. But where you get stuck sometimes is when you're putting the paint on. See, it looks like there's paint there from the wetness. And in fact, a lot of times if you use too much water, it's just all it is water. It's not paint. Okay. This here, though, we can detail that a bit more. Get a glaze, thin layer of paint on that. Let's go with a little bit more green, a little bit more red, get something dark. And again, the better color to use actually would be alizarin crimson permanent with viridian. That makes a beautiful, beautiful dark chromatic black. Because you can only get this to be so dark. And I don't want to use black. She's got a space in her lips here. And then here, let's get that in there. Still not dark enough right in here. So this is one thing you're going to have, you're going to have to be okay with this, is that if you don't have the paints, is that you just have to work with what you've got. I know that I can get a much better result if I use the traditions. But I wanted to work with these paints just to show you what you can do. But you can see how I'm having trouble getting some stuff in there because the brush is so darn soft. This is where I would go to, even my Filbert would be a good choice for this. There we go. Perfect. So that's a really good choice. Get in there. Okay. Let's just darken that up a little bit more. Because the lips go underneath. So although not a typical tutorial on how to paint something, I just wanted to show you more of the techniques and the brushes to use. Because that's something that that you guys are frequently asking me is about the brushes. And I did a lesson just on brushes to show different, to do a little bit of a talk on that. So it's up to you if you want to, follow that or just work with what you've got. Just going to flip that over. There we go. And then once we get all this in, then we can start working with the highlights. The highlights is what's really going to bring everything together. This still, in the photograph, this is almost black right here. Okay, let me just go with a bit more red. And I'm going to go with a tiny bit of extender. I'm going to put another layer here. And let's get a bit more red in here. Right over that previous layer. The more layers you add, the darker it's going to become. There we go. And now the tiniest little detail brush here, this is great for, again, tiny little details, and you have to use this with water. So I'm going to do this wet on wet. I can come in, look how tiny that is. You can't get too many strokes out of this. So I'm just going to put some lines in there. This is for the highlight. Just to show you, you can really make something look wet. Okay. And then on the flip side, this is where you can also make shadows. So if I take the dark paint and I can create the lines in the lips like that. This is where you can really create I've got that terrible glare. What I'm seeing when I'm painting is that glare. That's why I'm having to tilt. When you've got little brushes like this, you get some really nice detail, but you know what? You don't have to go to this extreme. There's a bit of a shadow in here. Right in there. I'm going to bring that down a little bit more right there. So this is where this brush really comes in handy with all the detail. You just got to be patient with it. Be very, very patient with it. And just change the colors. Get a bit more water in there. And I mean, you can go crazy with this brush. Oh, something happened here. What happened there? Something happened there. I think I might have smudged the paint. I'm going to cover it up and see if I can fix that as well. In this corner, it's very dark. Okay. So for detail, it's great. If I had to pick one brush to use, it'd be the Filbert. You can't go wrong with it. You can't go wrong. Let's take some white with a little bit of red. Actually, let's get a bit more red than that. And then we can just lighten a little bit of the area right in there. Not too much. By using a little bit of water. If you use too much water, you're going to get too strong of a stroke. But if you use too much white, you're going to get a very chalky look. I'm going right over where those dark pieces are, and then you can get a much lighter finish. So I'm brightening up that area, so you can, if you only had the one brush, you can just use that to soften some spots. Then let that dry, then go back over with just red paint, and then add a glaze. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do this. Okay, see all that detail in there? Whole bunch of different ways. What I want to do now is let this dry. I want to show you with that dome brush on how to dry brush a highlight on the lips. Okay, Miss Mia is gone. I want to show you two more brushes. Bristol, you've got this little other little dome brush here, very soft, and then this one here, you can get nice little areas where this here, you can see the size. So dry brushing is a nice way to get an overall soft look. This might be a little bit rough, but let's try it. So I'm just going to load it with white and get rid of the excess. And let's see if we'll be able to, here we go. You can't get too detailed with this because the brush is rough. It's rough. So let's try with this little small one. Okay. So let's round it, and it's a little bit harder. The paint's not really sticking, but you can see it's getting kind of clumpy there. But what can we do? Okay, you know what? Let me go really extreme on this. What can we do to fix that? You add a glaze of red. You just build it up. I would, first try to use my finger to brush it out, but you can use a glaze of red to get rid of all that excess. So if we use the small dome brush, this one's my favorite because I can get the marks like what lips look like, and I'm only going to work on this side because this whole piece is in shadow. And let's see if I can actually apply the red right on top of that. If you don't let the red dry, you're just going to get pink paint. I gotta use my small brush. Apply a good layer. It's transparent, so you're still going to have some of that white showing through, but it gets rid of the majority. See, even here, go back over, you can still see the strokes underneath the value changes, but it gets rid of all the white. So it's just a great way of just building up all the different things. So one thing, the challenge is the color of the paint. So I need to really go into more of the yellow to brighten up, to lighten and brighten up the red, because I don't want to add white because we know what happens. Experiment with the brushes. The Filbert is if you had to only have one brush, the Filbert is a great brush to use for that. Many layers. Avoid the tiny detail stuff unless you absolutely have to. But try all these different ways. I showed you a lot of different things that you can do. And some you can omit. Some you can combine together. Use them all. Use just one. Try all the different techniques to find what works for you. Like I said, I combined a lot of stuff in here to show you. And dry, 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 dry. Now, if you were using oils, I'm going to sneeze. If you were using oils, drying is an issue. When you're working with oils, when you're doing this type of thing, you let the layer dry. Unless you're working wet on wet, which is a completely different style, you would let each layer dry anyways. If you're working with Terraskin, don't use a heat gun because it'll deform everything. All right, so let's go to our Filbert. And it's still a little bit wet. I'm going to go in with a little bit of yellow. Yeah, that does it. That makes a big difference. And just lightening. So my initial layer of red was a little bit dark, but that's okay. It's all about showing you the techniques, not how to paint a set of lips portrait quality. It's just to show you a bunch of different things that you can try. Okay, see, by just lightening that up. Now this part here is where I had that really thick blob of white. I'm going to come in with a little bit more red. Just going to even that out a little bit. There we go. See? And while that dries, just to fix up the side here with the portrait colors, we could just go in with the white. And let's go in with a little bit of yellow oxide. the paint's all dry. Bad girl. Don't go do that. Go to a fresh area on the palette. A little bit of yellow oxide. Speck of red. And I take a speck of green. And take a little bit of extender. I want to make it really fluid. And then I can come in here and just touch that up. Now remember, the extender will make your paint transparent. So if you've really made a big strong boo-boo, you'll likely not be able to cover a lot of it up. See, just to show you overall the dark, it doesn't get rid of everything. The extender really makes things transparent. And when you're working, like right now what I'm doing is I'm doing negative space painting. There's a way to do this so your lips don't look like a cookie cutter. The way I'm doing it right now, it's going to look like the lips were cut out and pasted on top of the background. You just soften things. And that's a whole different thing when it comes to portrait painting, is to soften edges so they look much more natural. In the actual photograph, the lips are really strong because her lipstick is really, really bright. So you always use the reference material as it's in front of you, whether it's a photograph or a live model. Okay, so let's see how those lips really look like they stand out. But you would basically soften. This is where you work with the layers. So down here, although it's not in the photograph, and I can go in here, less extender to really cover that up. There's normally a shadow under here where the lips are. No, all this is still dry. So there's normally a shadow under here, which is where your chin is, right there. And up in here, there's usually a shadow, so you would come in here. Now, what I'm doing right now is wrong. I should be drawing or painting what I see, not what I think I see. I think this is the way it's supposed to be because it's the general face. But going to the actual photograph, is that what we actually see? Is that what we're going to actually see? Turn. I don't know. I can't get to the bottom of the photograph. Yeah, it is dark under here, and it is dark right up here. It's dark right here, and it's much darker than what I thought it was. So let me make this a little bit darker. Right in there. Dark there and dark there, and this area is much darker. Like I'm talking, it's almost black. So I'll just come in here and just darken it up a bit more. Let's get some red. And then you can choose whatever you want to do for a gray tone. You can choose what you want to do for that. That's the right value. But this paint, very slippery, a very slippery type of paint. It's great for impressionistic, abstract. But, oh, the thing is bent like crazy. Oh my God. How far does the dark go? Right down to here. And I don't know what's up here. Her nose is here, so her nose would actually be right there. And then, let's see, dark. She's got dark right in here. Actually, that's almost black. That's almost black. And, whoops, got too much green in there. That's fine. That's fine. It's about values right now, not about color. But this is what I'm talking about with the style of paintings. That very impressionistic spirit and energy. It just may not be your style. This is just a study, but that may not be your style to get rough painting strokes. That's fine. If it's not, no biggie. Where's the yellow? And a touch of red. Right in there. Tweak that up. I like that gray. That's a nice gray. Well, there you go. So you can see how quick you can just get something in there. But these lips are very much a painted style of lip. And from here, all you're really doing is just building up. You're just building up the detail from here. So let me just go one last thing to do. And you're tweaking in little bits of dry brush of white. That's too thick. And you don't want to go over everything. Okay, keep it light. Let it dry. Come in, tilt the brush around. If something doesn't seem to be applying, go in with a little bit more paint. Don't be afraid to wipe it off, then come back in. Just light touch in the beginning. This is still a little bit hard. I would probably do the layer of this and glazing probably about another two more times or so. I find this is still a little bit intense. The paint's just not sticking. So I really should come in here with some matte medium and get a ground in there. Now there is no white up here, but this is where I reserve the right to come in here and just put a few little details right up there just to boost a little bit of that highlight. And the finishing piece, if you really want something to look wet on a permanent scale, take some gloss medium. Take some gloss medium when this is all dry. And just apply some gloss medium over the whole piece, and the finish will be shiny. That's optional. You don't have to do that. And I'm going to go right to about here because all this is in shadow here. It's not shiny. This is also a matte finish in the photograph. I'm going to apply just a little bit here, but it's really shiny right there. And it'll look like that permanently. All right, so now I got to let this dry. And then when you're working with oils, you're going to have that shine. With acrylics, if I were to do this again and I will be doing it again, with the fluid acrylics from Traditions, it's not as shiny. It's especially the fluid acrylics is flat. The Decor Americana, their high-end craft paint, is also a flat finish. So take that into consideration when choosing what paint that you want to use for the actual finish. At the end, though, at the very, very end, it really doesn't matter what paint you use, because you can always varnish it, which you really should be doing anyways. Varnish with ultra matte, matte, satin, gloss, high gloss, and super high gloss. Use a varnish. And when varnishing, if you're doing a formal painting, always varnish with the worst case scenario in mind, which is why I use Decor Duraclear varnish, because it's indoor-outdoor. Although you're not going to put a portrait outdoors, but if it goes into, let's say, into a bathroom or a kitchen where it's high humidity, you want to make sure that your painting is protected. Painting studies, I wouldn't worry about varnishing, but just want to put that out there so you have the knowledge. Alrighty, so there we go. So that's just another way of combining a whole bunch of different techniques. Pick and choose what you want. Take the photograph, grab the line drawing, create your own version, post a picture below so we can all take a look at it. And don't forget to write a little bit of a commentary about your experience, what technique you use, what paint you actually use, what brushes you used, just so everybody else can kind of share in with your experience and learn what worked and what didn't. Alrighty, so I hope that you enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you in the next one.